Boys, I want to talk to you about building bigger, stronger arms today. Specifically, I want to start with the topic of building bigger biceps.
Sure.
Caleb, you seem to be the resident expert here with the bigger arms in here. But I want to talk about choosing bicep exercises, the best ones, like kind of in your opinion.
Sure.
And some of the things that we see people doing, or they're just doing it's like in the program or whatever, that they could be doing better. Not having to totally change their program, just some of the nuances of some of the stuff they could be doing to build bigger, stronger arms.
Totally. I think, there's no reinventing the wheel, right? Like all the good exercises are already out there. I think the biggest issue that I see is, and self-included, this was a problem for me for a long time, was just execution and lining things up mechanically in a way that makes sense. I mean, when I think of building big arms, I think of two populations, right? You have some people whose arms just grow. You could have them doing like bench presses in rows and their arms.
They get bigger arms, yeah.
And those same people could be doing like wild swinging hammer curls and, no control and all this stuff. And their arms are going to grow. And so this probably doesn't pertain to them that well. Like it does. I mean, if they execute better, they're probably going to get better results, but they probably don't care so much because they're getting good results. Exactly. So then you got people like me who do all that stuff and my arms stay like twigs, you know what I mean? And so I've had to really dive into looking at the mechanics of the biceps and the triceps and lining up the exercises in a way that actually, hits the muscle properly. So for me, it's like, okay, a lot of people go to free weights right away, right?
They're accessible and you're going to find those pretty much in any gym, right?
Yeah.
So, and those are the ones, who doesn't know what a bicep curl exercise looks like? It gets used all the time as an example.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think of big arms? What's the first thing you think about? It's like Arnold or something like that, right? Like looking at his videos and pumping iron with the fucking concentration curls and the great swinging. Videos, yeah. So, but let's look at like a dumbbell bicep curl, right? The way most people are doing it, there's a lot of motion coming at the shoulder joint, right? They're kind of shrugging up. They're maybe not being super strict with, how far down the elbow is extending at the bottom. I think a lot of people think about it's moving the weight from point A to point B instead of moving the elbow joint through its full range of motion, full extension, full flexion. You get people who end up doing these things where the weight, which is gravity, right? You're holding a free weight, gravity only goes straight up and down, really down.
Unless you're using a machine that's changing the direction,
exactly. Right? But if we're talking about dumbbells, free weights, it's just gravity. So you have to position your body in a way where you're resisting gravity in the exact same line as the bicep pulls, which a lot of people don't. They end up pulling kind of at an angle to that gravity.
Or the same angle all the time because they don't know how to manipulate their body position in space.
True. And so you do a bicep curl with a dumbbell and then you do a barbell curl, but mechanically you're doing the same fucking thing.
So give me an example of how to change your position in space, still keep that line of pull while working only against gravity, say with a dumbbell. Like what's your favorite dumbbell exercise for building better biceps?
Sure. Well, the first one that makes the most sense to me is like something where you can stabilize the upper arm, right? Usually at the elbow. So like a preacher curl.
Okay.
I like to do it with a single arm because when you see people doing it with two arms, like with a barbell, what happens? Like both of your upper arms kind of rotate inward, right? To grab the barbell.
Yeah, internal rotation at the glenohumeral head.
At the shoulder, yeah. And so when you curl up, the weight's still moving straight up and down vertically, but not truly vertically, but it's moving straight up and down, but it's not lining up with the joint. So if you use a single arm, you can kind of twist your body as much as you need to because everybody's built a little bit differently in a way where now when you move, the wrist is in a straight line with the elbow, which is in a straight line with the shoulder, and the dumbbell travels in that same exact plane. Then you throw in the fact that, you're pushing your elbow down into the pad of the preacher pad or a bench or whatever you're using, and then it stays stable.
Right. I love that exercise too. And I think everybody can kind of relate to that. They've seen it and, everybody loves that one so much. They built machines to do this, right? Where you sit down, you have the preacher bench with the cable and the stack.
Totally.
Just backing up there, just a correction, not glenohumeral head, the humeral head and the glenohumeral joint there.
Sure.
There's a lot of things that are happening in there. And it's interesting when people are, who doesn't want a better set of pipes, right? They're always trying to build those arms. But Jeff, just kind of going over to you, some of the common things that end up happening when people don't respect what Caleb was just going through there, just in terms of joint position and the mechanics of the movement while trying to overload those biceps. Some of the stuff that you see on a regular basis and we're constantly trying to kind of unfuck people from is some of the I don't want to say damage, but some of the issues that can arise from not respecting what he was saying. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
So you're talking joint position.
Yeah. And I'm just talking about like, we see a lot of biceps tendonitis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, obviously it's coming from more of a sedentary position and then not understanding how to use your, scapula and your humerus at the same time and working in that glenohumeral rhythm. So people don't know, as your upper arm goes into flexion, you have the scapula that's going to come and rotate, and they need to work into cadence with one another. And when that function stops working properly is when we start having issues. We start having the biceps tendonitis that you're seeing, the fraying of the biceps tendon rubbing in and out. And like Caleb,
through the groove that runs through that head of that humerus.
And so like Caleb's saying, the stabilization of, let's say, the jointer, you're going into a bicep curl, you start shrugging, right? You're not able to stabilize the shoulder joint. Your arm comes forward. When you come down, you're letting it come back, right? You're not able to stabilize that upper arm and work through the forearm, through the full range of motion of the elbow joint. Right. And so like he's saying, the reason why he likes the preacher so much is to stabilize that upper arm. He's able to come through and create tension.
Really focus.
But what is he really doing? He's creating a radiation,
right? Which
I should be able to do a preacher curl without the bench, right?
1000%.
So this is what we're trying to teach people in any movement is what people not, right? What we're trying to get people to understand.
Right. Particularly in the world of bodybuilding, right? When we're very much focused on an isolated movement to train a very, very specific muscle. So going back to the arm training, the bicep training, I mean, is there a case where, you really load up that barbell, or you could really load up that grab a heavier set of dumbbells where you are creating maybe a little bit of momentum and a little bit of maybe shoulder flexion extension and still get some benefit out of it?
The answer is always depends. It depends. For myself, it doesn't. The risk doesn't seem to outweigh the reward. I think one thing that's really important to me is tracking my progress, and we need tangible metrics to track progress. Besides things like measuring, the width of the muscle, right?
Just how the exercise feels,
right? But or like how good of a pump you get. But that doesn't tell you that much, right? And so we keep a logbook, right? Or something, some kind of tracking, so we can see if our performance is increasing over time. Because if our performance is increasing over time, yes, some of that could be neuromuscular changes that are just, leading to us being able to produce more force without actually building muscle. But that's only to a certain extent.
Yeah, good point.
For the most part, if our weights are going up over time, our reps are going up over time, we're building muscle. So when you introduce things that can't really be tracked, like using momentum, how do you know that I actually beat last week's session by an extra rep? Because maybe I just swung a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, look, you have like big bodybuilders who have built their whole, like world class physiques with like cheat reps and swinging. You look at a Branch Warren or Fouad Abiad, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue that, right?
He has the worst form.
You can't, no. But
like 12 times.
And so you can't say it doesn't work, but what I can say with full confidence is training as strict as possible will work for everybody. Training with a little bit more looseness will work for some, for sure, but it may not work for others. And so if you're somebody who wants to be absolutely positive that what you're doing is giving you a good return on your investment, which is time and effort, be strict, control what you're doing, I mean,
that's a really great point. I think that's a huge takeaway, that strict form or, really minding your mechanics will work for everybody.
Sure.
But the momentum piece just is probably not a good idea for most people.
Right.
Not everybody, but for most people.
Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, exactly. And so you mentioned, now you're in this position of flexion, right, to build that bigger bicep. Let's talk about the position of extension and how, like if you're at home or you're at the gym, how do you do that well if you're limited with equipment, say with just dumbbells?
You're talking about shoulder extension or
shoulder extension?
So just for context, it seems kind of backwards, but shoulder flexion is moving your elbow forward, right? So shoulder extension is behind, and that's a really good point. Is that the bicep has two heads, and the longer head originates on the scapula, not on the humerus, and so we can change the length of that long head of the bicep depending on the exercise we do. And so a preacher curl is nice because, one, it's really easy to stabilize. It's a great learning exercise. But two, it trains the bicep where it's in its fully shortened position, right? And so we do want something kind of to counter that. So to train something where at the very bottom, the bicep's in its fully lengthened position. And so something like an incline curl is fantastic. And that incline curl being where your upper arm is basically set just a few degrees behind your torso. So normally your upper arm is like in line with your torso if you're doing a dumbbell curl. With preacher, obviously it's in front, so we want it to be a little bit behind. Not too much, we don't want to be feeling an excessive stretch in like the anterior delt or anything like that. But yeah, and then the same thing, you drive the weight straight up. You do not want to really try to scoop your elbow forward and lift it. You want to keep that upper arm stationary. So your hand won't actually travel as high physically, but you'll get a great squeeze in your bicep, and it'll definitely overload it in a way that's unique to that type of setup.
So I'm curious, like just with this, as we're talking about building bigger arms, bigger biceps, what is like, if you only had one and you had to just use one exercise, and it could be just like one piece of equipment,
sure,
right? Because we're training the biceps, we're doing elbow flexion. That's
sure,
what the biceps do, right? Yeah. But if I had to pick one, or you had to pick one, what would it be? What equipment or what exercise would it be?
Fuck. You're asking me?
Yeah.
What I personally like best as a preacher, I think what would be the smartest answer would be an incline.
Okay.
They have demonstrated that training muscles when they're in their most lengthened position can lead to greater hypertrophy outcomes than training it from more neutral or shortened positions. Obviously, we want to mix, but if you only could pick one, I would choose something that would be lengthened.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jeff, what about you? Like if you, again, and you can't pick that one.
Yeah. So for me, it's going to be concentration curl or preacher curl, anything where I'm locking that upper arm or elbow into something and just really focusing on the concentration. I love the what is it? The arm bar or the
easy curl bar?
No. It wraps around you and you rock your elbows in.
Oh, the arm blaster.
Oh, the arm blaster.
Arm blaster.
Oh,
dude, arm blaster. It also makes you look so fucking big.
So
Push your
big.
shoulders forward, you're just fucking getting it. I mean, horrible for the shoulders, right?
If you can keep the shoulders back.
No, they're not staying back, dude. That thing's pulling them forward, dude. But yeah, it looks good.
My personal go-to, I think, if I had to take a pick, would be like, and I couldn't take those two exercises.
Sure.
I would take a cable machine and just a single handle.
Oh yeah.
And so that I could keep that tension on that muscle. I just love the cable machines for arm training.
Oh yeah.
Biomechanically, we can keep that muscle under tension typically longer because we don't have to work with the
dumbbells kind of suck for our
well, we've changed the direction of gravity,
sure.
right? And so dumbbells, but I like the cable machines for that, because especially if I have access to a gym, because I can kind of do the dumbbells kind of anywhere. You can find a set of dumbbells, but if I have access to these cables, man, I'm really going to make the most of the cable.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong. There are still some bicep movements, at least I'll use dumbbells for, but for the most part, for arms, I generally prefer cables. For triceps, actually, I only really use cables if I can help it. We can get into that later, but I mean, that's what I would go with.
Yep.